Okay. So, what is Leadership Twin Cities? Leadership Twin Cities, which you'll oftentimes hear us refer to as LTC, it's the Minneapolis Regional Chamber's community leadership and professional development program. So this program has been around since 1976. Today, we've had more than 2,000 people go through the program. It brings together, a great group of people each year. We typically have around 50 people in the cohort. There's one cohort each year. And they're typically our up and coming leaders, people who are engaged not only in their organizations, but also in their communities. And they're from a cross sector of industries. So we have participants from for-profits and nonprofits, as well as government entities. And the program lasts for 9 months. So it is a time commitment. It's one day each month from September through May. And we use that time together to really take a look at the critical issues that are facing our region. Our goal is to help future leaders be knowledgeable, well-networked, and passionate about the success of our community. And that really is important, now more than ever. To have a prosperous economy that works for everyone, we need people who are leading organizations or pieces of our organizations to really understand the critical issues that face our region. We need leaders who look at situations and opportunities, challenges through the lens of the whole community, and that really kind of look at ways to pursue options that builds well-being for all. So it's an important piece of this program. So a little inside glimpse. So it's important to kind of note that no 2 years are ever the same. Every year we have different speakers come in, different topics. We really build it from the ground up each year so that it is timely and it's talking about the issues that are current and important in our community right now. This is typically some of the program days that we focus on. So we separate the program into critical issues. So each day kind of focuses on one of those issues. I think anyone who's gone through the program will tell you that they all end up sort of overlapping, right? Because you can't really talk about healthy communities, providing for those in our community experiencing homelessness without also understanding the public policy implications behind it. So they all really overlap and kind of complement each other. But this is the schedule. So we start with a 2-day kickoff retreat, which is really focused on creating great relationships, trust to start the year, because we do have courageous conversations throughout the year, and it's really important that we know one another in order to feel comfortable and safe bringing our entire selves to the program. Cultures and Community Day is really focused on the people and places that make our region great. Economic Development Day focuses on those things that are the economic drivers and engines of our community. Community Safety and Justice. Healthy Communities Day, like I say, is kind of focused a lot, at least in the past years, we've looked a lot at affordable housing, food insecurity. Government Day, in the past, we've gone to the Capitol, met with local lawmakers, learned how our city, but also our state government works. Education Day, Arts and Culture Day, and then Vision Day is the day that usually it wraps it all up. It brings it all together and allows people to kind of take everything that they've heard and learned over the course of the 9 months and really focus on what is their plan for making an impact, for taking what they've learned and heard and going out, and what will they do with that information and knowledge to make our region a better place. So those are, like I said, typical program days. Sometimes they do change, sometimes they do move around because every year is different. Each program day then brings in speakers, we do tours, we do interactive experiential learning experiences. These are just some of the speakers that we have had this past year. This is screen one, screen two. So you may see some familiar names. The steering committee, which is the group of alums that have gone through the program and then in turn turn around and program for the following class, they do an amazing job of reaching out and bringing in some of our top thought leaders in the community. People who participate in the program have unbelievable access to these people to really ask questions and hear from the people who are thought leaders in our community about the topics at hand. So like I said, lots of great speakers come in.
Sherry, there was a question in the chat that said, what potential changes do you foresee given the current situation? And then to Matt and Alita, would the experience be as meaningful if you were not able to participate in person?
That's a great question. So, and I can speak to the first part, and then we can let Alita and Matt kind of speak to the second part. I think when we get to that part where the alumni can speak. So potential changes, obviously, like everyone, we are not really certain what the next couple of months hold in terms of when we will or will not be able to meet in person. So depending on the guidance of the state, we may start next year's program meetings in smaller groups. We've been brainstorming some really creative, fun ways that we could break into smaller groups, but still kind of mix it up so that we can meet everyone. We've also had a lot of success transitioning to virtual. We just had a virtual program day last Thursday for this year's class, in which we were able to bring in still the same great speakers and have those interactive sessions that are kind of a hallmark for the program. So, either way, I think I'm still very confident that we can provide a really great program experience for this year's class, whether it be partially virtual and partially in person, all in person, or even all virtual. But it will be different than in previous years. So to that's for sure. But I do think we can make it different but equal, if not greater even, to previous years' classes. Oh. Oops, hold on. Sorry, guys. Oh, okay. There might be some gremlins in my computer. Okay, very good. I don't know if that, I don't know if Alita or Matt, if you want to kind of address Courtney's questions now, or what your thoughts are in that regards.
Yeah, I can chime in and talk a little bit. I served as the co-chair for this year's program, and so I got the fun task of working with Sherry and Sarah and my fellow co-chair on figuring out how we were going to navigate this as it was all unfolding in real time. And I do think that we had a really great vision day in the virtual context last week. I was really pleased with what we were able to put together. It was a lot of fun. It was informative. And so I think there definitely are ways that you can do this successfully virtually if you need to. I also have a lot of confidence in Sherry and Sarah in terms of coming up, given more time, to come up with some even more creative ways to still make it an enriching and worthwhile experience. I know they've been immersing themselves in best practices when it comes to digital learning and building connections virtually. Some of the ideas they have around smaller groups, I think, is really intriguing. And so I would just kind of echo what Sherry said, in that it may be a different experience, but I think it would still be a worthwhile experience. And I would also argue that perhaps the stuff that you're learning in Leadership Twin Cities is even more important now. as we're seeing all these challenges in our society related to COVID-19, and how all the things that you learn in Leadership Twin Cities really come together in that and can make you a much more informed and better leader within your own organizations and within your community during a time like this.
That's great. Thank you, Matt. Alita?
I mean, as usual, Matt just knocked it out of the park. The only thing I would add is, along with Sherry and Sarah, just coming up with unique and interesting ways for us to learn. I think the large group that is the steering committee, and when you get all of this brain power in one room and brainstorm all of these different ideas and things that they've seen in their organizations and in other organizations and that they're involved in, the power and the opportunities just grow exponentially. So I think there's a lot of people who want to make this program great for everybody who participates. Anybody who participates is then a part of our network forever. So we're always welcome to anybody who's willing to put in the effort, right? So I'm excited to see where it goes from here.
Very good. Well, and I think we're going to come back to Alita and Matt and let them share a little bit more about their experiences in just a few moments. But wanted to first just show you a very brief video that kind of just is a synopsis of some of the programs, the experiences that the class this past year have had. I'm going to play the video, and you might just want to hover over your volume key in case it comes out loud. Hopefully it won't, but I don't want to hurt anyone's eardrums. So just a heads up on that. Volume may be an issue. So let's try this. All right. So I actually threw in a little preview there. I love that video because it's like it shows it's a lot of great sessions in Leadership Twin Cities and learning and hearing from fantastic people, but it's also a lot of socializing. So there was a lot of that. And I did throw in one. We had one that had Alita in there from like a couple years back. So that was kind of fun to see too. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you today Alita Bergen. She is one of our distinguished alums. She went through the program in 2016, 2017. She is the marketing and business director for Snow Cry Architects. And she's also served on the steering committee for the past 3 years and was program co-chair in 2018 and 19. Also, your bonus alumni today on the video with us is Matt Norris. And Matt Norris is actually, just as he mentioned, coming off of a very illustrious year as co-chair of the program for just this past year, and has also served on the steering committee for several years. And Matt, you'll have to remind me, I think you went through the program, you said 2017?
It was 2016, 17.
Oh, it was 16, 17.
It was a good year for the program that
Good vintage. Yeah, awesome. Very good. So I'm going to turn it over to them because I feel like really the best way to understand the program is to hear it from people who have recently been through the program and what their experiences are. And so we'll let Alita go first and kind of just share a little bit about her experience. And then if you have a question, by all means, also type in if you have a question for Alita or for Matt. So Alita.
Right. Thanks, Sherry. Yeah, 16-17 was a good year. I was super glad to meet Matt and my 49 other cohort members, many of who I've stayed in touch with, many of who are still on the steering committee, and we work with regularly to plan the next program year. So it's been really great. It wasn't a one and done for me. I really love this program. I've told many people about it. I see a couple of familiar faces on the call, which is really exciting. I pretty much wear an LTC banner across my back when I'm networking and out talking with people. Comes up a lot in conversation and I get a lot of questions about it. At the end, I'll share my email in the chat and you guys can reach out to me directly if you have other questions that I don't touch on today. Matt will say everything better than I do. So I'll just let him, I kind of organized some of my comments in answering a few questions that Sherry threw at me earlier today. So I'll just take a break after I answer each of those and let you add your thoughts on that. All right, Matt? Okay, cool. So the first thing that Sherry asked me to really think about is how my experience helped in my career or my civic engagement. Without going into my whole life story, I felt like before I did LTC that I knew a little bit about most of the things we were going to talk about, but really I gained a huge understanding of the regional issues. I grew up in northern Minnesota, moved here right after college, and I felt like I was pretty well plugged in. Did my share of volunteering, did my share of being on neighborhood boards and things like that. I felt like I kind of knew what was going on, but this program opened my eyes to a whole different level of that. Also, so many different viewpoints were shared from the different speakers and also from my class members that really just helped me more deeply understand what was going on in the world around me. And both from the public sector, the private sector, the nonprofit sector, and just organizations that are working so hard to kind of move the needle and make real change in our community. So it wasn't just, they weren't just there to learn something, or they weren't just there to put it on their resume. They really wanted to make a change, and that was a really eye-opening to me, to be around those people with that amount of passion and drive to really make a change. I think both personally and professionally, LTC has offered me a unique opportunity to grow my network. Like I talked about, those steering committee members and new cohort members every year. Because I've stayed involved, I actually meet a lot of the new cohort members during the retreat, which has been really great. And I'll just say that every single new class that I've met since I went through is a really smart, talented group of professionals, again, who just want to make a difference. And that's been amazing. Matt, do you have anything to add?
Yeah. So Alita had some very kind things to say about me. I'll say she left very big shoes for me to fill as a co-chair this year. So I did my best to live up to the standard that Alita set last year, and hopefully I made it at least part of the way in living up to that standard. For me, when I think about how Leadership Twin Cities has impacted my career, I think it really does, as kind of Alita was talking about, come down to the people. And your class is made up of really cool people. And then afterward, you have the opportunity to serve on the steering committee. And the steering committee is really the coolest of the cool. These are people who are so engaged in the community. They're the leaders in their different fields here in our region. And just one example of how the LTC network can really pay dividends. I went through Leadership Twin Cities back when I was working at Achieve Minneapolis, and one of my passions is sports, and I also like event planning. And so the Final Four was going to be coming to Minneapolis, and I said I want to get involved with that effort. I'd love to help plan the Final Four. And it just so happens that the woman who led that effort here in Minneapolis, Kate Mortensen, happens to be an LTC alum. And so I managed to track down her contact information, said, hey, I'm also in Leadership Twin Cities, saw you were, that kind of, gave us a little spark to then set up coffee. The next thing you know, I'm involved with the Final Four planning effort. Through that process, I met Marcus Pope, the vice president at Youth Prize, who then when it came time for Youth Prize and Venn Foundation to create a new program and look for someone to hire, Marcus reached out to me and said, hey, would you be interested in coming to work at Youth Prize as part of this new program that we're starting? And so because of LTC and the networking I was able to do as a result of it, I'm now in the current job that I am today.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you, Alita, both for kind of sharing your thoughts on LTC and your experience in it. Matt, your story is fantastic. It's also not, the first time that we've heard things like, the network has, really been helpful to people, whether it's exploring, other like next steps in career, or even ways to get more engaged, if it's to join a board or to become part of an organization as a volunteer. We hear about those connections happening all over the place. There's so many times that I'll be in a meeting somewhere or a conversation, and I'll mention Leadership Twin Cities as one of the programs that I interact with, and that person will say, oh, I was a Leadership Twin Cities alum. I went through back in the 90s, or I went through when it was called Leadership Minneapolis, which is what it was called in the early parts of the program, all the way up until I believe around 2000. So my guess is within your own organization, if you started asking around, there would be people within your own network and your own organization that went through the program. So that's kind of part of the just really the nice part of being part of a program that has such a legacy and an impact in our region. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the actual process, the application process, and answer those questions for you. But first, what I'd really like to know, I'm going to send out a poll, is how did you hear about Leadership Twin Cities in this session? So I'm going to launch a poll to find out kind of how did you find out about it? So I'll give everyone a minute or so to respond to the poll. Very good. So it's it's pretty even with email, it looks like. Looks like we're at 91%. So I'm going to go ahead and finalize this poll. So it looks like email, followed by a very close second of former participants. And I find very frequently that people who are interested in the program oftentimes do hear about it from someone who has already been through the program because they speak highly of it. So fantastic, very good. Thank you, guys. I'll share those results with you so you can see the results of the poll there. Before I move into talking a little bit more about the application process, I'm curious if there's any questions that anyone has they want to ask right now. You can go ahead and either raise your hand or you can unmute yourself and ask. Okay, hearing and seeing none, I'll go on then and share some information about the application process. And as something comes to mind, please do not hesitate to ask. So kind of going back to that schedule that we showed. So the program is 9 months long. It starts in September and goes through May. We currently have scheduled in September that overnight retreat. As we mentioned earlier, that could change slightly given the status of group sizes and with COVID-19, how we're able to engage. So that could change, but we're keeping that on the calendar currently because we want to make sure that people have those days really blocked off. And it is important for full participation in the program. When people apply, we ask that they go ahead and put down those days and block them off as busy time so that they don't get scheduled over with meetings or other things going on with work. As it is really important that people are there for each program day. It's important not only for the speakers that we're bringing in, but also for your fellow classmates to have your perspective, your point of view. We want to make sure that we have everyone there for as many days as possible. With that being said, there's always, one day maybe for a schedule where you're already looking at your schedule and you're like, well, my brother is getting married on the day in December. That's not going to work for me. You can always reach out to Sarah and I during the application process and share those concerns with me. Typically, if someone has only one major time issue that they see, then I would encourage them to go ahead and apply for the program this year. If you look at the program dates and think, gosh, I've got 3 or 4 dates here that I already have conflicts with, this might not be the year for you to apply for the program. So it is important that you're able to participate to your fullest. Most of the days are full days. They're scheduled from 7:30 or 8 a.m. until 4:30, and then there's always an optional kind of social hour afterwards. So you can plan on them being full days. There are additional tours that are presented, things that happen off of program days called call to action. They're actually oftentimes given very high ratings. They allow for us to have people go and visit places that maybe we're not able to do on the program day itself. So in the past, we've had call to action tours. Gosh, Matt, help me out. I'm going to draw a blank. We do everything from go to Mill City Museum. We've had tours of the Science Museum. We've taken people on a behind-the-scene tour of
the medical examiner's office.
Medical examiner's office. Yep, go on.
The jail, Hennepin County Jail. On a lighter note, the Mall of America. That's actually a really fascinating one. There's a police ride along that you can do, or a sit along with a 911 operator.